Hey, everybody. Welcome to Covendom. Covendom is a live call-in show from the point of view of traditional witchcraft. I am here with my co-host, Brian Cain, who is a high priest of the Alexandrian tradition and also known for making life-size dioramas of the absolutely fabulous crew in risque positions. My name is Levi Rowland. I'm also an Alexandrian high priest, and I have stepped away to be here tonight from my magnum opus, which is a 42-volume work linking every single episode of the 90s extravaganza Touched by an Angel with the Holy Books of Thelema. So if you want to call in later, we love taking calls. You'll see the number on your screen, 309-GODDESS, 309-463-3377. Also, I'm very excited today. We're going to be bringing on a very special guest. You might have heard of her. Her name is Silver Ravenwolf, and she is an icon in the face of witchcraft throughout American, the whole explosion of witchcraft in America. She is famous for writing To Ride a Silver Broomstick, Teen Witch, multiple books on puppet magic, angel magic. You know Silver Ravenwolf. So we're going to bring her on in a little bit. Anything you want to say to the fans?
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Also, I'm going to start with some occult news, and then we're going to give it to Brian for an occult demonstration before we bring it back with Silver. But before I say that, I want to say if you're watching us on Hex Education, which is the channel on YouTube that we broadcast through, give us a like and subscribe. If you want to see old episodes, they are under the live archive of Hex Education. So thank you for joining us tonight. I did not find a ton of great news, I'll be honest. It's been a slow occult news week, but I did see a couple of things that I wanted to share for our magical news section. The first I thought was really cool is that in the southern Urals in Russia, they are uncovering a nomadic ritual burial site. It's actually quite huge. And it's really showing how nomadic peoples, like in the Indo-Aryan migrations and whatnot, carried through religious rituals even when they weren't in settled communities. So there's a lot of really cool information coming from that. And one of the things that was so cool about this one is they found a motif of a tiger's head, which there's no tigers anywhere near where this was found.
At present day, yeah.
And so it really does represent that they were already this nomadic tribe. It's 3rd, 4th century BCE, are already trading with either Far East or South Asian traders. So you can see the religious bleed, like in the images that they use in their offerings and everything. It's very cool.
Well, a lot has come out since the Iron Curtain fell. We're just starting to research a lot of things we weren't privy to before that.
And making comparative archaeology between Eastern Europe and Western. It's a lot of cool stuff's coming out of that, but you can look it up on Archaeology Magazine. There's two I want to hit on tonight that are Christian, but I think are interesting to think about. The New York Times ran an editorial piece recently about something that if you're on the internet a lot, especially YouTube and TikTok, you're already aware of, but a lot of older people who don't follow those platforms aren't. And that is the phenomenon of what is called an ortho bro. Right? So the ortho bros are young men who are converting to Eastern Orthodoxy. Usually they come with this sort of traditionalist worldview, very into sort of the glory of old Christendom, incredibly conservative political beliefs, but it's rapidly growing. And it's had influence even in the intellectual spheres on people like Paul Kingsnorth, who converted to Romanian Orthodoxy after leaving initiatory craft. I think he was Gardnerian. But it's something that keeps growing, and it's also growing in what they call the rad-trad space, which are, again, predominantly young men who are converting to sort of a very radical form of Roman Catholicism. They only go to Latin masses. They only participate in sort of, old school Catholicism. They're very judgmental about the way the church has developed since Vatican II. So it's just something I think is interesting to watch as we see this sort of grasping at Christian nationalism that's happening in a lot of Western nations, Poland, Hungary, the United States. And it's something to keep your eye on, I think, honestly. But on a related note to what we talk about a lot on this show is, I do think it's fascinating that they're so obsessed with converting to these liturgical,
that's the
art-heavy,
trend.
Old world religions, right? People, I think, who are interested in spirituality are starting to be hollowed out by the new age.
There's a lot more of a quest for authenticity re-emerging in the face of everything being so prepackaged.
And not only that, the fear of change that's going on right now, I think, drives people to these super conservative spaces where they're like, I feel like I'm solid, I have a worldview. And I think that might be something we could talk about tonight, about how I see that in witchcraft spaces too. Where people are really, really not into light. They want something more serious. They want to go deeper.
Well, conservative also offers you a structure that you don't have to think about.
Yes.
And I think, more people who are more on the liberal side, generally, there's a lot of food for thought. And we even argue among each other and debate I mean, we can be very vicious with each other.
Yes.
The conservatives can too, but they don't really have to think about the structure and some people don't want to. Some people don't want to. They want it
given to them. Yeah.
They want to just take something and feel, like you said, solid in themselves.
So I have two more. The first is, and this is big for a lot of magical practitioners who practice with the Virgin Mary. There is a lot of controversy around the current Pope Leo and his new statements in the Statement of the Magisterium clarifying the role of the Virgin Mary in Catholicism. There's been a sort of dislike from the papacy of the term co-redemptrix, which is a term a lot of trad Catholics give to Mary. So I think that that's interesting to watch as well, is sort of like, even they are getting a little nervous about this sort of goddessy, over emphasis on the feminine in the church. And for the first time in a very long time amongst this generation, like Gen Alpha and Gen Z, more men are going to church, which is very strange historically. It's never been true, right? It's always been the purview of women went to church, right? And men tried to get out of it historically. So seeing this like masculine movement that's—
Do you mean like cis men or trans men and cis men?
Both, right? So like
so trans men are going
I don't think trans men are going to be welcome in the Orthodox Church, unfortunately, because they're very conservative. But I think there's this sort of like hyper masculinity that people are trying to inject into religious spaces that used to be dominated by women.
That was sort of my pun there.
Yeah, like Catholic nuns. Yeah. There used to be a lot more female presence, and it's a weird thing to watch. I'm not going to, there's no judging how it's going to go, but it's just fascinating to see. And
I'm going to warn you. I'm going to have you retrieve that for me, and you'll find out why soon.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to end on a funny one. There's recently on the Christian Broadcasting Network, if you want a good laugh, you can watch a famous ex-psychic who turned, it's not Doreen Virtue, but who became a conservative Christian, who went viral recently for releasing statements that if you send your kids to watch the second installment of Wicked, they will be possessed by demons. So
if you want a good laugh, say that about the Care Bears, and
I know they used to say that about like
the
Polly
Smurfs.
Pocket.
I mean, the Smurfs were satanic. It was everything back then.
Absolutely,
the satanic panic.
I'm going to pass it to Brian for our occult moment, and then we'll bring on Silver in a moment.
All right, so this is going to probably get a little weird because we used to do like show and tell. And then we did occult demonstrations, which is kind of difficult for me and Levi because we don't really publicly teach people magic. There's certain things you can, of course, discuss, So anything I'm doing here today is, if you choose to mimic it or be inspired by it, that is all on you because this is not training. So I wanted to talk about, so it's going to be kind of two-part. There's going to be some things that, might inspire you, but also I just want to talk about magic, right? So I am very conservative and old school in the labels and terminology I choose to use within the sphere of witchcraft, as some of you may be aware of. It's not that I don't understand more liberal modern terminologies or other person's narrative, and I won't get on the soapbox of the many levels of why people call witchcraft different things right now because I don't want to get distracted. So I want to make it very clear, I'm not talking about witchcraft in this moment. I'm talking about magic, right? So for some people, those things fuse, right? And I'm not doing that because magic can be found in many different cultures and many different religions. So not just Europe, not just Britain, and not just under the term witch. I think a lot of people of European descent or people who are inspired by modern content creators or phenomenons, they are drawn to the word witch for whatever reason. And that's a different subject. So I'm talking about magic in a historical sense. So although Levi and I are initiates of the mysteries, I'd say we both agree that we're sort of a reincarnation or a resurrection of something much older. We're not necessarily trying to make any fanciful claims about an unbroken continuance.
Sure.
However, I want to talk about magic, and I want to talk about how there has been an unbroken continuance of magic and what that really means and what it looks like and how it actually affects you. So in the modern Western occult movement, we really break these up into two parts. We have what we call high magic, and we have what we call low magic. I think this would be more easily understood if we called it ritual magic versus folk magic, because these are really the two spheres that survived into the modern era and affect every Western occult practice that you can possibly get your hands on. So the one that I'm going to bring up first is going to be the grimoire traditions. So this isn't an ancient grimoire. This is a new version of the Key of Solomon, not the Matthews.
It's not the Matthews.
Not the Gregor Matthews.
Skinner and Rankins,
but it's a really good one. And it's the one I got off the bookshelf. So this represents an entire movement that existed within Western Europe, predominantly by Catholic priests, to practice magic. And almost all of these grimoires are Christian based. You know, you are working with angels, you are working with demons, and the various names of Abrahamic gods are generally in the contents. There's a few exceptions where you will find some other things, but these people weren't really working from the Greek magical papaya yet. You know, that didn't come out till later.
They wanted to be seen as Christian.
Yes, they were very comfortable with Christianity. That was their religion, and they were practicing Christian magic. So most of the grimoire traditions are simply that, Christian magic. You know, today we would often call them magicians because there are certain orders of people who call themselves magicians, and they're initiated and trained into their respective schools of magic. However, they're all drawing upon these grimoire traditions. The grimoire traditions are ritual magic, right? So it's very much going to be about tools. It's going to be about gods, angels, demons. It's going to be about magic circles, magic gestures, and above all, planetary magic.
Yes.
So you won't find any really ceremonial magic or high magic that is not planetary influenced. Even if it doesn't say it's planetary and it's saying it's angels, it's still planetary. Yeah. So it all crosses into this planetary magic, and which is why you have a weaving of people who were practicing this, who were also practicing astrology and astronomy and what they considered science at the time. So, but definitely these were religious people. These people all believed in God on some level, and they were all Christian on some level. So that's one thing that survived to our present day through people retaining these books, through the church retaining these books, through certain popes like Honorius, I think his name is.
Yeah,
you know, and of course writings like Cornelius Agrippa and all that sort of thing that are so influential to what we do today, whether you think it is or not. If you're practicing any kind of planetary magic, you are influenced by these works. And they survived through the church and through the elite, through people who could read and write and were usually highly educated, which is true of like the Greek myths and all that sort of philosophy that we're all exposed to, that we have the privilege of being able to study at our leisure today, was not true in the medieval era. Most people couldn't read or write. So that's the first kind of magic. Now, the second kind of magic I want to talk about that survived is what we would like to call folk magic. And I think some people really don't give folk magic the credit that it should. So this is the magic of the people. So, you know, there's crossovers between these two things, obviously, and there still are. But this was you using animals, minerals, vegetables. It was you using the things at your disposal, and it was a very different way of thinking. No one was thinking of this as science. So I would say that ceremonial magic was really coming from the intellect, and they operated from the intellect. Obviously, there was a certain amount of faith and belief there as well. But in folk magic, I don't think they were operating from the intellect. I think they were operating from the heart, you know, sometimes from fear, but from a very emotional place. And it was more popular with people who were not educated, but that's where it survived. So when we say folk magic, we're saying the magic of the people, because that sort of thing survived through the common man, right? And that's why you find folk magic, you know, in every culture that you can possibly imagine. You could summarize it as folk magic, right? So folk magic will be where we will get into our demonstration. I've got this really big doll here. Who should we name this doll? Who should it be?
You have to name it. You have to baptize it. I used to do that, you know. I used to baptize
secret name. I'm not going to give any real things.
Janet.
No, I'm not going to name it Janet. This is clearly a boy. So we have, I just feel like it could be. So we've got, this is a gris-gris bag, right? Which in New Orleans is, in this particular set, is always got animal, mineral, vegetable in it in some way. So it's not very vegan, really. And then, of course, we have something many witches are aware of, magical cords or witches' ladders or whatever you have to say like this. So a ceremonial magician, let's say they want to heal someone, right? So they're working in art of healing. So they're probably going to work with some sort of talisman of the sun. They're going to make a very elaborate magical circle that is inscribed on the ground. They're going to have their tools. They're going to do elaborate invocations, and then they're going to kind of give it up, and that's that. You know, everything has to be very thought out, precise. And if it didn't work, it's probably because you did something wrong in the technique.
Maybe God doesn't like you.
Yeah, maybe God doesn't like you.
Maybe Calvin was right.
Where with folk magic, it just depended on where you thought your power was coming from. So a lot of folk magic was also Christian. So that's what where I'm kind of getting at with this. It was also Christian. So if you study folk magic, you'll find things to the Christian God quite often. Catholic ideology. Once in a while, you will find pagan things. You will find things with Thor and Freya and things like that in there, often mixed with Christianity. And then, of course, you know, sometimes it's the fairies or nature spirits or whatever you're contacting. So in this sort of idea, you know, you go back to some of the oldest magic. So instead of just working directly with God, you might work with the idea that because you're getting your power from Satan or whoever it is, that you're going to pray to Satan, because that's another thing, and you're going to say, okay, I name this doll something wild, and it has mental illness, and so I'm going to put this healing gree on it so that it can get the help that it needs, right?
He has people in mind right now. Just guarantee you.
I'm playing. So then we're going to say, well, this person's not only a danger to themselves and others, and maybe even their family, but we want them to get the help they need, and we want to make sure that this person doesn't cause any harm to anyone else. So in the power of Satan,
Satan tonight. Interesting choice.
May the wild creatures be bound, filled with love, and grow into better human beings. So it would be that simple, probably no magic circle, just the making of the doll, the cords, all those sorts of things. And we would probably call this up to superstition now. You put that over there. Now get me that thing off the jar and the cross and the whole kit and caboodle. Okay. So this was my idea, and somebody might get mad that I'm handling this, but they left it on my table, so it's mine now. I came into this as an exact example. I have no idea what this is supposed to be. It could be a trapped demon. It could be a healing. You got to get the other thing too. You got to, it sounds like something from The Exorcist, but I walked into this perfect example of folk magic. So on the table, there was a rosary. This is nothing to do with me, by the way. And this is not to do with anything I do. And a jar of water. I don't know if it's holy water or what. And then just this cross sitting on top of it like that. This is an example of Catholic folk magic or Christian magic. What it's for, I would say a healing or to rebuke some negative thing. Here, it's yours now.
Hand me back, Jesus.
Perfect example. Now, what I want to really point out to this is it doesn't matter whether you're, creating a circle or whether you're just making a doll and what you're doing. I want to point out that in all these cases, God is always involved. Not necessarily the Christian God, but some sort of higher power. There just really wasn't a tradition of magic to where there wasn't something else involved in the idea of European society. And I'd kind of garner any other kind of society really either. Of course, some superstitions would dilute as time went on. So you get like the lucky rabbit's foot. No one's thinking about Jesus and the lucky rabbit's foot these days. But maybe at one point in time, it was sacred to a goddess or something else, and it devolved into what it is today to just be lucky, and those things certainly exist. And that's where we would break it down into being superstition and not magic. I'm not saying a superstition can't be magic, but all magic derives from religion. And it was a religious belief, and it did survive. So whether or not the ancient priesthood survived, or whether or not witchcraft survived in any kind of continuity, humankind in the West did keep magic alive through the common acts of farmers, midwives and the superstitious peasantry to popes in Rome.
All the way.
Everybody. And it's never ceased. So remember, this is a part of your heritage and your legacy. And I think people should just think more on that.
I agree.
That they all cross over. And certainly both of these influences influence the modern.
And they influence each other.
Yes.
I also think something that, before we bring on Silver, something I love is there's a comedian I like named Kathleen Madigan, and she talks about growing up Catholic. And she talks about how the Catholics don't go to Jesus first. Mm-hmm. And she goes, I kind of felt as a child that, I should go to my guardian angel, the saints, all that, because otherwise you're just bothering Jesus. It's like, that's how she phrased it. You're just bothering Jesus.
And people have those kinds of beliefs.
But it's like folk magic so often is like, well, we're not going to bother God for this, but we're going to bother like our dead grandmother. But you know what I mean? Like,
you're letting the demon out. There were lots of folk prayers where you'd say, Michael, St. George, and the Virgin Mary, or whatever it was going to be. So I'm going to bring on our wonderful. I don't know
guest.
what kind of a demonstration that was.
It was a rant, but it's okay. God loves you anyway. I'm so happy to welcome Silver Ravenwolf as she comes in laughing. How are you, Silver?
I'm excellent. Thank you. I loved it. That was perfection. I really enjoyed it.
We are so happy that you're here with us tonight.
Well, thank you.
As per usual, you guys can call in. The number is 309-GODDESS. I know we want to see if the phones are working. Anyone but Christian call in questions at any time. We're not doing a formal sort of thing. So for this season, we're just having a coffee table conversation. So we've prepared some questions on the topic of witchcraft now and then. Is that what I called it?
I believe so. Witchcraft now and then, past and present.
From our own experiences to, how we're perceiving it in the world today. I think it's an ever-changing. I mean, those of us who've been around for a little while have probably seen it go full circle several times.
I'm sure, Silver, you've seen a full circle.
Yes.
So let's let Levi go with the first question.
So I'm going to start asking Silver. I wanted to start with this question in particular because I think sometimes when we are comparing past and present, it's very easy to get negative very quickly. Like, here's what I don't like, and those darn kids, right?
I think this is meant for me.
No, I'm saying we all do that. It's human nature, right? So I want to ask you, Silver, what is a change that you've seen in the community or a change in witchcraft spaces that you actually like? So something that you've seen grow or change in the community that you think is a positive thing.
Oh, well, that's a good question. That is a really
good on a nice note.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think it's very positive that it's exactly what you were talking about earlier, Brian, where people are acknowledging the different facets of what we all believe in. Where when I started, everything was, well, it's either this way or that way. And if you're this way, then you're crap. And if you're that way, then you're crap because you're not part of us. Yeah, you're not one of us. So, and I have really enjoyed seeing the embracing of different cultures, of different practitioners, of different ways that people do things, and the acknowledgement of it. I really like that. So thank you, Brian. That was really great. Perfect intro. Perfect.
That was just insanity at work because I came unprepared.
he did it a lot of it on the fly.
And I'm not responsible for the exorcism jar. So,
Brian, what's a positive change you've noticed?
So you think this can't be answered and being mean at the same time?
Yeah, I was going to say. I know it can, but
this is what came to my brain. I'm happy that Scott Cunningham has fallen out of favor.
So hateful he is. Do you hear this?
I get it probably did some good things for people. I like the fact that, of course, we need materials and source materials for all kinds of people and different levels of where they are. And I know a lot of people who benefited from Scott Cunningham. I was just never a fan. I think it's great, though, that I love to see the fact that people are beginning to demand better materials.
I think so, too.
I mean, I can look at Silver's book, for instance, to write a Silver Broomstick. That was a huge upgrade to anything Cunningham ever put out, and I love seeing that sort of stepping stone in our practices. Like for instance, we went from Charles Leland to being able to get exposed to Ecstasy of the Witches. What's his name?
Carl Ginsberg.
Carl Ginsberg. Yeah. We every once in a while we just get these groundbreaking works that make us think of a new thing. And I love the fact that there is in the actual practitioner sphere, there is a continual upgrade, and we have some really good contributors now.
I think so too.
That we didn't have for years. So it's great.
I think I'm going to piggyback off what you said, Silver. I think something I like to see is that there is this understanding that we can talk to one another and understand one another, but still be our own thing, right? So it's very interesting to see somebody come and be like, look, I am a Reconstructionist. I'm not interested in ceremonial magic. I'm interested in this very particular culture. And then you can have somebody who's a rigid Thelemite. They're reading Crowley every night. They're like doing the AA, and they can still find a common ground without this need to sort of bulldoze into each other's space, right? I think we're all a lot more comfortable.
There's a lot more growing in that area.
Yeah, where it's like, I'm this, you're that. That's cool. And I don't know, you get more juicy conversations that way. I
was also thinking about this from my own perspective. I was very much able to do that with the revival, with the books I wrote, where I can look at Rosalind Norton or I can look at Robert Cochrane and see they're very different. But
you see camaraderie.
Yeah, symbolique, very different from, Gardnerians or Alexandrians per se, but still connected and still very relevant to the work that carried this movement forward.
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah. So how about you ask our next question, Brian? You can start with Silver. We're putting you on the hot seat again.
Okay, let me pick one. This is kind of a weird one. All right. How has the internet age changed the transmission of witchcraft teachings compared to the traditional in-person apprentice model?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'm kind of stuck. I have,
No.
We're known for being blunt on this show.
I actually researched the show. Well, I'm thinking back to when the internet started, and I remember my husband and I meeting a group of witches who were only speaking to each other on the internet and had no in-person training. And they were a lot different than what we were used to. I think the internet is amazing for connecting us. I think it's marvelous for giving us the basics. I think it's extremely detrimental when it's used in a negative way to disparage other practitioners. And basically, they're doing it for attention and for money. And that's not what I was taught. I was taught that, I was taught a little differently. I know that love and honor were very much a part of the craft practice. And you can't love and honor someone if you're trashing them on the internet for thousands of people to see. So I think that's the internet in that response has been a bit of a detriment. But on the other hand, it has provided ways for us to commune. During COVID, it was one of the few ways that people were able to talk to each other, talk to their covens, talk to people outside of, their apartment or home. It was a lifeline.
Things got weird.
Things got weird.
Yeah, it was amazing. So I see the positives and I see the negatives of it. And if we can just learn, I think the internet still is kind of like the Wild West. We're still learning to handle it. You're handling it in a wonderful way with your program, but there are other people that are handling it maybe not so hot.
Yeah.
And so if you have a beginning practitioner who's watching both, sometimes they get very confused. That's my answer.
No, I think that's true. What about you, Brian?
Well, I know they say not to do it, but occasionally you go read your own reviews, right?
Yeah.
And I really don't normally, but I ran across this book review. It was a negative review on, I think, my second book. And this woman was like, I have no idea what he's talking about. I don't know what kind of witchcraft he's encountered. I've never heard of any of these things. So I don't really know what he's doing, but I don't like it. So, yeah, I mean, the word witch is such a broad thing. You know, people are raised with what their thoughts are. So the negative side of the internet is obviously everybody gets a microphone, everybody gets a keyboard, everyone gets to shout out their opinion in ways they would never do in person.
It has changed people's like standards of conduct.
The positive side is it allows for great communication. I mean, without the internet, we probably would not have met Silver.
Yeah. You
know, and there are relationships that form through the internet. They're very positive. There are opportunities. I do prefer to use the internet as a platform for my work in witchcraft, but as like an outer court introduction, like the show, or hey, we're going to have this event, or here's this book I wrote. I don't like it for getting on debating, because I think the debating kind of venues, whether it's your personal wall or whether it's some blog post, is what invites the trolls and the haters. And it's what makes those things popular and entertaining for people. And which is why you'll get people who don't delete the nasty comments, because they know that's what's generating attention. So, you know, anyone who's fostering that is the game they're hosting, you know. So I think I like to stay very far away from that. Maybe very far removed from me. I don't like that side, and I try not to
a hermetic
engage it in anything. You know, I wouldn't want to go in and debate about fashion with people, you know, because it just invites the ugly.
I think I used to be a pretty like, oh, it's neutral. It depends on how you use it. I think I do lean a little bit more towards the negative. I think social media, one of my questions, so I'm not going to spoil it, but I think social media is going through a pretty nasty stage right now. Like a lot of people, it's become politicized. A lot of people determine the platform they're on based on things. And so it creates these really like intense bifurcated communities. And I think a lot of people who have left social media, there's a huge drove of people who are...
We know it's affected elections.
And, you know, now when you're looking at a feed on a lot of social media platforms, it's just ad after ad. There's a term that's used. I can't remember who invented it, but it's talked about a lot, called enshittification, the enshittification of the internet. I know it's not a great term, Silver, which is, it's just been so commercialized that you don't even get the joy out of it anymore that you used to by discovering new things, because it's just the same thing over and over again and sold to you. So yeah, I think I land a little bit negative, but to answer the question more directly, I don't believe that you can pass on a lineage except in person. I think you can pass on teachings and ideas and concepts, but I mean,
I totally
a religious witch, right? I believe I think that there is something that actually metaphysically changes within a person when they're doing live ritual with another human.
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to add to that.
Yeah.
During COVID, one of our groups wanted to dedicate and initiate members online. And I said no, because to me, in person, there is an energy exchange.
Yes.
There is, first of all, it's a gift to me. Secondly, it's a portal. You and whoever you're working with, you are creating this amazing opportunity for an individual. Now, what they get out of it is entirely up to them, but you're there together and you are exchanging the energy. It's not the same as much as I adore both of you. I'm sitting here. I can't touch you. I can't.
Yeah.
We're not getting this complete.
Here, I'll do it for you.
But we're not getting the complete exchange. We're only getting partial. What our words are, our expressions are. our emotions, we can get that, but we really can't get that energy that's going back and forth when we're sitting in the same room together.
Which is why I showed up today.
But Silver, I'll say this. That also makes me think of something that has become, how do I word this? Like a tough conversation I've had with people before, where they'll be like, well, that's very unfair to people who live far away or whatever, or don't have a local thing. And I just take this path a lot more serious than that, to be perfectly honest. And I don't love that answer, because I'm like, these are
Who
people,
said witchcraft was fair?
Exactly. Or easy. But like, there are people who move for their careers. They move for marriage. They move for college. They move for graduate programs. Like, you can't move for the thing that you're saying is bringing you into contact with magic and the gods. Like, I don't love that.
I think it actually
will provide you the opening. And to the answer to that question is, Spirit will provide the opening that is right for you.
When you're ready.
If you can't get there, then that's not for you.
I also think it depends on what people are approaching. Like, a lot of people who might make the statement like, I don't think that's very fair, they're probably approaching it as a hobby or as a spectator religion, because that's how a lot of religions are. If you want to be Buddhist, you show up to the temple when you feel like it.
You want to be a Christian,
everyone's accepted. The vocation of witchcraft is very different than having your own magical practices, and so if you're entering into a coven or a group or a priesthood, you're making a commitment to their work, their line. And I certainly agree with Silver that ritual initiation, any kind of initiation really, cannot be done online.
Yeah.
And the people that I know who primarily do that outside of the face of COVID are doing it for money, and they're initiating people for money and giving them a certificate, and it means absolutely nothing. It's worth less than the paper is printed on. And I feel bad for people who approach something like that and think it's valuable, but I do think once somebody's requested initiation, I bet you most of them find out on their own that it's not, and hopefully go on to better venues.
It's like Silver said, I think that people who really want this find it. There's a magical thing that happens.
Or as you might know, it finds you.
Or it finds you, yeah.
Yep.
So what about you, Silver? Do you have a question?
I do have a question, actually. Okay, each of us comes to the craft through different lenses: devotional, theology, astrology, history, archaeology, ritual theater, everyday household magic, and more. How do your own lenses shape the way you understand the gods and create ritual? So if I'm in circle with you, what would I experience?
I think that my own lens, personally, and I think anybody who knows me knows this, is very theological, right? Like, I wrote a whole book about the goddess. I came to this religion for her. That doesn't mean I don't honor the horned god. I love him with all my heart, but it's different, right? The goddess is a revelation for the world. So for me, the lens of, I don't see magic as a science like a lot of people do. I see magic as an art, a religious art, right? So I think that's how it colors.
You had really good teachers.
I did, didn't I? But I think that is the lens that colors all of my ritual and all of my experiences. I am not interested in like mainline Protestant witchcraft, right? Where we come together and people are not thrust into life-changing experiences, because it goes back to what you said, Silver. If somebody approaches you for initiation, you are a door for them. And I think it is so disrespectful to steal that away from them by grounding it too quickly, by saying, no, they're not ready for this. They can't handle that. I need to dumb it down.
And just to trigger everyone, you're also the gatekeeper.
I know, right? But it's like, I feel so passionately about the idea that like I am introducing somebody to an ecstatic experience that they are going to develop on their own. So that's always my lens. My lens is, I'm not simplifying this. I'm not making this easier. I'm just not going to do that. Not because I'm to be vulgar, not because I'm some sort of hard ass, but because, or conservative, but because I don't want to take it away from them. Like I want them to be shook by the gods, because they came for, you want to taste the fish, honey, you ordered it.
I agree with Levi. You know, I definitely first became interested in witchcraft because of magic, which is actually a role reversal to a lot of people from my era, which was just a few years ago. So I got interested in magic and first approached it that way, which is very common nowadays, really. But it was really it was from reading Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft that I was introduced at 15 years old to the concept of the goddess. And that's really what propelled me. So in my circle, we invoke the gods regularly. And we always work the arts magical from beginning to end. That's my
we
answer.
have very, I like that those are our lenses. What about you, Silver?
My lens has, well, you know, I was thinking back, each one of us has been inspired by people that we have met along the way. And they have changed perhaps the way I originally thought of it or helped me grow. One of my very favorite teachers was Ray Malborough. And I loved his down-to-earth, strong belief in witchcraft and magic, and I loved his style of teaching. So for me, my lens has been helping other people and teaching. I'm constantly teaching when we're together. I'm constantly looking to help people make their life better. And I have heard, you know, some people say, well, witchcraft wasn't about fixing yourself until Silver Ravenwolf came along. Well, you know what? Good. Whatever.
I'm not gonna blame you for the self-help genre because I think your books actually instilled personal responsibility, not
yeah. My children don't like that. But nor do my grandchildren, but yeah, we'll own up to it. So I think that's my lens is art. My lens is helping other people. And my lens is trying to help them remove their pain. I know it's weird, right? It's not what you expected me to say. but there you go. Yep.
Do we have any questions from the chat?
Oh, I did. Yes, I've been a bad chat person. They're having a whole conversation about
can't see the
Lord
chats.
of the Rings in the chat right now, Silver. We can see your comments regardless of whether you're watching Silver, Brian, and I through Facebook, YouTube, whatever you're watching. We see your comments. So, you know, I see Lady Silverwit. You know, I see Silver Willow Sage and Tim and so many other people. And blessed be to the initiates who are chiming in. It's so sweet of you. Let me go down. I just missed one.
One ring to rule them all. One ring to find them. One ring
just
find them.
Oh God. Okay, so
fun.
I'm going to paraphrase a couple of comments that we're going back to what we said about online versus in person, because I think this is an interesting distinction. So we'll start with Silver. How much of a compliment can an online teaching space be to that in person? Like, you know, some people are like, how often do you think that people need those experiences that are grounded in real ritual versus following a curriculum or a series of meditations through correspondence?
I honestly think it depends on the person. Everybody learns differently. Everyone needs a different amount of personal one-on-one time. Some people really need time on their own to, the reason why my brain is like going in another direction is I have a special needs puppy, which I mentioned earlier. And my special needs puppy is trying to eat its dinner plate right now.
That's fine. Tracy had her cats on. We're very animal friendly.
We're very animal friendly. I've got a bathroom kitty right now and a demon poodle.
I'll be right back.
Good time. So you did take the cat in?
Oh yes, she lives in the bathroom now.
Because when you say bathroom kitty, that sounds like some sort of device that one purchases.
Somebody said that
for something unscrupulous.
Well, because when they're supposedly feral, which I don't know if she completely was, you're supposed to put them in some sort of isolation, and I didn't want to use a cage, so the regular bathroom.
Yeah.
It's where she lives now for the next 2 weeks. She's doing very well.
No worries whatsoever, Silver.
No, a magician I know thought I was speaking of my private parts being cold.
I know. He has a bathroom kitty.
I don't have a personal bathroom kitty. I have a kitty that lived in my courtyard for 3 weeks and never left. She's very small, and she stole my heart because I knew she wasn't really going to live on her own.
It's a side of Brian that a lot of you probably don't know. He would set your children on fire for a laugh, but he loves little animals. And he takes very good care of them. So, we're all different. We're all God's children. It's like some people have. It's
the fairy prince story.
But no, you were saying
they're all dying. Isn't it amusing?
Silver, if you don't get that, that's what I tell people when people ask me what Brian is like. I say he's a lot like a fairy prince from a story where he's like, I've hidden your children in this maze. If you can find them before midnight, they'll live. You were saying, Silver, that you think it's dependent on the person basis, in person versus Yep. I think I might add, that was a big thing in our own tradition historically. Maxine talks about it a lot, about how hard it was where people would travel and stay for long extended periods of time for training. Then they would go back. Then they would not be able to come back for 7 months. And
I think one of my favorite quotes for her was, those who could not afford the trip to India would find their ways on the front porch of Clannical.
Yes. If they couldn't get to an ashram, they would come to London.
I actually have a personal experience of this because, previously, I would say online training, no, not at all. But when I was helping set up the Salem Coven, I couldn't be there I was there for every ritual at first for the first couple of years, but I couldn't be there for every week because I lived in 2 different places. Here in New Orleans, I had competent priesthood who could train without me at this point in time because we've been going on for 12 years or something like that. So, but no. So I started doing online hermetics. I still don't advise it. I did it for a while. It gave them something to work with. It was better than nothing. But now they're doing their own hermetics in person in the temple like it should be. And I'm sure they're benefiting a great deal more.
Yeah.
So I think necessity is the mother of invention. So like COVID, there might be instances where you do have lectures or talks or things like that. We had a May Day during COVID.
We did, remember?
Where I said, everyone dress up. We'll be festive. I was the only one that showed up.
He was the only one that dressed up.
Yes. But we just hung out. So yeah, basically, I think craft's meant to be taught in person. But sometimes you can learn certain things from conversations and lectures and questions.
This goes back to what you were saying, Silver, also about the sort of validating and understanding people's particular practice. So if somebody came to me and they were like, I want to be Alexandrian, but I'm not going to be able to come to your coven except once a year, I would be like, well, then it's probably not for you. But that's not saying that magic's not for you.
That's right.
There are correspondence courses that I still think are relatively strong. Builders of the Adytum, and there's a couple others that I do think Paul Foster Case's material and stuff like that. I think those are very valid choices for people, and they were doorways to the mysteries for some very big name occultists.
Nowadays you can get your hands on anything you want to, if you really want to. But
if you're somebody who, that's what I would say is advice, I guess, if somebody is talking about this in the comments and whatnot, if this is where you're getting at it, is if you can't do that, it's okay to let something else be a doorway.
That's right.
Also, everyone on here, raise your hand if you started out solitary reading books and figuring this stuff out on some level. Because
everyone does.
We all did. And I think people forget that. Sometimes initiates themselves forget it, that you weren't always an initiate.
Yeah.
Stuff happened that made us want this thing. We didn't just wake up one day and say, I think
I'll be a witch.
I think I'll join the witch cult.
If you told 13-year-old me that he was going to be a witch priest on the internet, I would have ran you over with a car. I would have been like, Jesus is not going to like that. So, you want to hit us with one, Brian?
Oh, sure. Okay. What role did the counterculture movements of the 1960s and 70s play in shaping today's popular understanding of witchcraft.
Ooh, counterculture and witchcraft. Silver, you want to take it?
Oh, moan. Moan. I'm going to pass because I know what's in my mind, but I want to pass.
All right. If you think of
Yes.
something along the ways,
Interrupt us. It's
Levi?
a round table. I think it's very important to realize that hippie culture in the US was not the same necessarily as hippie culture in England, which is where our tradition comes from, right? So
My mother
different.
thought hippies were dirty.
You know, it was this is like a little known fact, but there was like a lot of homophobia in the hippie movement. They weren't really progressive in the way people think they were. And also it was much, much more interested in the East, right? It was very much the rise of the guru in the 60s and 70s in the US. So I do think that the people who ended up pagans or witches or magicians, they were a different subset of that. And, you know, there was a difference. So I think it's too, even when because it was a big deal for Maxine and Alex that a lot of their early initiates came from the counterculture, but it was an English counterculture, not an American one. And they sort of changed after becoming initiated. They weren't just all flower children, right? You know,
I didn't know all of them or any of them really. But
when you read their stories, though, they're different than like American sort of Haight-Ashbury kind of counterculture.
You think about it, obviously for me and Levi, the first things can pop into our head is Alex and Maxine, because their major work as Alexandrians, because they both were in the craft before the word Alexandrian was ever uttered, and they were working out of Manchester in a coven that was just called a witchcraft coven. Nobody was calling themselves Gardnerians or Alexandrians. And, as we moved into the mid 60s, obviously the whole world was changing, and so I definitely think that the fact that people were being exposed to counterculture in any country that was of the West, where you were allowed to be exposed to countercultures, it started challenging the norms, like Christianity or established religions. And so people were getting into New Age practices. It was becoming socialized. People were, getting into free love and drugs. So I think in a sense, it was a really good time for people to say, well, what about alternative religions? What about this witchcraft religion? What about that? What about feminism? What about goddesses? All these things. So I think it was very much important for the exploratory side of things, but I don't think it affected just witchcraft. And I think witchcraft would have went on without it, but it was what happened. So as far as the hippies in the Alexandrian tradition, there were many.
Oh yeah.
Because the Gardnerians, as they were starting to become called, were more like, at that time, very different nowadays, were more into the old occult elite attitude, to where they wanted people who had money and it was exclusive and what have you. And they weren't holding up to the magicians on that, but they were still
wanted to, though.
Yes, that they wanted to.
To.
Alex was come one, come all, was more of a person of the people. And so I think that had a great impact on the fact that so many people at one point in time were initiated as Alexandrians. How many of them stayed? I think it was Val who said it was like a large fishing net was thrown out, but in the end, it was the lifers who stayed, which probably equal the Gardnerians or any other real tradition that's got its core people that are practicing. So I think it had an effect.
Sure.
And I think witchcraft had an effect on the counterculture.
We still are. I mean, you can buy your supplies at Target now. There's two comments that Craig made that I think are very good. One of them is, in the beginning, it's important to recognize that Gardnerian craft folks were quite conservative, like culturally. They were. That's true. And a lot of public Alexandrians were much more invested in counterculture. I think that's true.
To remember, Maxine was, when this was going on, and she was the high priestess, she was, I don't want to misquote her age, but somewhere between 19 and to her very early 20s.
Yep.
She was very young. So she was of that era.
Absolutely.
Of that.
And then he brought up a good point, Craig did, in another comment that I agree with, which was something the counterculture did bring it to the occult world is ecology. like the veneration for Mother Earth, the worry about climate change. That was not present in the occult world before the counterculture. And so I think that's a good thing.
It really wasn't. It was like thinking about those things. The fact that we venerated a mother goddess, Mother Earth, that we venerated spirits of nature, led people to thinking about those things more conscientiously, which is one of the positive effects that witchcraft could have on the world. But initially, I don't think they were either, because at that time, everyone was taking it all for granted. And
it did change over time, though. So I think that's a good thing to bring us back to that.
I wanted to pass on this question because I walked into this at the tail end of, my cousin went to Woodstock. She was 7 years older than I was. And she went to Woodstock, and she was a hippie. She was the counterculture. And she was my inspiration actually for writing Teen Witch back in the day, because of some of the things that she had gone through. So in my own personal experience, counterculture really did have a huge effect on my life, because I listened to what she was saying. She gave me my first tarot deck. She didn't stick with it. And, the last that I had heard is, she went off to a normal religion, and, normal.
It is weird how many hippies became conservatives later.
Yes, she became a conservative, which I find most interesting.
A lot of did.
Yep.
They call the Reagan hippies, right? That's what they called them.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, it was a huge deal.
But I remember the music, the posters, the drugs, the free sex, the whole 9 yards. It was very interesting, and I think it very much changed what we are presenting today. We made our mistakes, and then we tried to not erase our mistakes, but learn from our mistakes.
For sure.
Yep.
I think it's also, sometimes it's easy to forget something counterculture definitely did for us is open up alternative religion in any way. Like, I think a lot of people forget how conservative religious lines were. Mm-hmm. I once had a friend who was a Lutheran pastor and older, and she grew up in an area where half the town was Catholic and half the town was Lutheran, and their kids didn't play together, right? Like, because it was a problem. And it's like, that's not that long ago. Where it was like, even like, well, you're the wrong kind of Lutheran, right? Or you're the wrong kind of like, it was that rigid. And the idea of leaving your religion was scandalous. It was just a huge scandal. Like the cousin that ran off to an ashram in the 50s or 60s, which happened a lot in England, that was a huge thing. And so I do think they did a lot for us in that way, like where it's like alternative religions are pretty accepted. But they were not at one time. It was like, you're getting cut off from the whole family.
Oh, when I was little, the Catholics and the Protestants did not speak to each other. They did. You didn't.
Which is wild nowadays.
Home. Yeah, it was totally different than now.
Those lines were so rigid.
Yeah,
they were very rigid.
I mean, it was that old joke. They had that old joke in Ireland where they would stop you at the border and be like, "Are you Catholic or Protestant?" And if you said atheist, they would say, "But are you a Catholic atheist or a Protestant atheist?" Like it was just that rigid. And I think so. I do think counterculture.
What were you born into?
Exactly.
Was it your turn for questions?
I can ask one. Yeah. So this one, we'll start with Silver again.
Unless we have one in the chat.
Not right now. But if you do have one,
you can still call in.
Pop them in.
309 Goddess 309-463-3377.
So Silver, I'm going to ask this one. How do you balance this nature of wanting to be public and teach and produce things for people, which everybody on this call does on some level, and then keeping certain aspects of your praxis truly sacred or private in the in this journey of like being both public but also having a private praxis?
For me, it's all one. I live it every day. I breathe it. It is a part of me. I have different aspects of my practice. We have the Black Forest tradition we are a bit of an anomaly. We're like in the middle. like, here's the eclectics, here's Black Forest, and here's the Gardnerians and the Alexandrians. And we're a bit of an amalgam of both, but we are also very accepting of the Braucherei, which we hadn't mentioned up until this point, And the Braucherei is very much a part of my everyday life because, as Brian said, it is a type of folk magic, but it's the way we use it, we concentrate, although there's many aspects of it. Here in this household, we concentrate with the healing part of it. And so I live it, like right now with the special needs puppy, just this evening, he has to have an IV every evening. So for a limited period of time. But so while we're doing that, I'm doing the Braucherei practice of the healing chants and charms, even if you wouldn't know I'm doing it because all you see me is holding the dog, you don't realize, what's going on. So for me, there's no line. Everything I do is part of my joy with the goddess, part of my healing I know I'm kind of like,
No.
she's brain dead. That's it.
He's been giving this dog this IV for 4 days. Like, I get that though. What about you, Brian? Where do you draw that?
Well, I mean, I've often thought the same as Silver that this is my whole life. I mean, there are obviously things I do that aren't directly connected to witchcraft, but really it is in my professional life. It is my religious vocation. It's my whole being. Almost everyone I interact with on some level is a witch or witch adjacent or a magical person. So there are layers. My practice is initiatory, so a large section of it only exists within those magical circles. However, I do have public work as well, and I have rituals I've devised for that, and I have platforms like this to where I believe it is part of my role to help educate the public or continue to educate the public, because although that's a work our elders began, I think it's a never ending. There are still people who think that we're eating babies and sacrificing.
The devil.
The devil. I mean, like literally.
You were praying to him earlier, but whatever.
There's religious groups today that still advocate that as being an ongoing phenomenon. So, that's important. But then I think it's also really important to have your own personal mojo. Never lose the curiosity, never lose the exploring, never stop developing yourself. And that I think you have to keep very private for you too. You can share it with certain people, but you have to keep that ongoing thing that's yours. So for me, there's the witch that I am in the public, there's the witch I am as a priest, and then there's the witch I am for myself.
They're all different.
And then there's the witch for Bathroom Kitty.
For the bathroom, taking care of his adopted cat. We have a really good question in the chat. Stephen asked it, so I'll start with Silver. How did you deal with bullying or hostility to the fact that you were calling yourself a witch when you were younger?
Boy, there was a lot of that. I know this sounds very trite, but what I did is I concentrated on the goddess. And I concentrated on the work, and I decided that no matter what they said, that is where my focus was going to be. And I was not going to focus on what they were saying or how they were treating me. I felt that goddess championed me, helped me get to where I wanted to go with the work. It was almost like I said, here's this mess. I'm going to do the work. And if at all possible, could you take care of this for me, please? It's not that we didn't have our trials and tribulations, on occasion, because we did. It's funny, when you asked me that, what came to mind is standing in Borders, which I love Borders, and they no longer exist, down in New York. And I was doing a book signing and a seminar of sorts. And I had this preacher, this little short guy, skinny short guy, and he's standing there, and he had his companion with him, who was this big, huge, hulking guy. And I'm standing in the middle of the people, and he walks up in my face, and he's screaming at me about how I don't believe in God and blah, 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 blah. And the big guy is standing there in the back, and I'm thinking, this is it. I'm dead. I'm going down. I'm done. And I got so angry, and I could just, it was almost, I hate this possession. I was just so mad that all of a sudden, all this just came spewing out of my mouth about.
Get the jar, Levi. Get the jar.
Get the jar. We'll
She was going to say
exercise you.
possessed. I was like, get the jar.
No, it just, I just hit another level. And I just started telling him, if he didn't think that I didn't believe that, and blah, blah, blah. And he shut up and he sat down. And so did the big guy. And I remember thinking to myself that was the goddess. That was not me. That was her. And she was going, you know what? So, yeah, I know.
Open hostility. Did you do
I'm not
4 years ago?
date myself.
5 years ago?
But yes. I mean, it wasn't horrible. So my parents were, we were raised Christian, but not like good Christians. Like we were raised like Christians that went to church on Easter for most of my life. My father did get saved by a TV evangelist when I was 13, and that brought some trauma. But I sort of started coming out to my parents around the time that I read Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft, and they read it. They read it because they were obviously interested in what their 15-year-old was getting up to. My father definitely had prejudices to it. He was curious, but he also thought it was evil. And my mom was pretty supportive, And so for the most part, my dad would harass me, but no one was stopping me, if that would make any sense. In fact, my mother dropped me off to my first magical circle that I guessed it into. So, really wasn't bad. My father was the main antagonist. They were a couple times with my mom. Like I remember once she opened up my closet and a giant deer head came falling out. It was a ritual
garb,
but it was a real deer. It wasn't mine. It was on loan. I brought it to a solstice and it came falling out. And she's like, "Oh, that's the devil." I'm like, "Mom, when have you seen the devil as a deer?" So for the most part, she was but I did have people in my age group, because my friends in that age group, we were the teen witches before Teen Witch got written. And dated myself. And some of them had it worse off than I did. And so we navigated it by, sometimes we couldn't have our things out. When I first got into it, I had a trunk and I hid things because my parents didn't know yet. So it was kind of like witchcraft was treated the same way as the porno magazine.
Yeah, it's like contraband.
You didn't have them out, or drugs. Yeah. So, but we did it anyway. We snuck out. We went into parks. We did it anyway. So that's how it
Witchcraft is as rebellion, so saith the
It was
Lord.
a little bit of a rebellion, but I didn't really have it that bad. Not really.
I'm very lucky that I had supportive parents. My parents didn't like the church. They sort of rebelled against it when they were younger, so I was very lucky. I did grow up in an incredibly conservative place, though, but I was Catholic at the time, so I don't really have a huge experience of it, to be honest. But
that's like Karen. My friend Karen, she was raised by basically a secular humanist, highly educated woman who was also a high-end nurse. And she just was like, well, God's nature, basically, that was her idea. But Karen was so alien to it. I remember first time she saw a Catholic festival on TV. This is years after she got into witchcraft. And she was like, they're worshiping Mary. They're Mary worshippers. Like, it was so alien to her. She'd never even realized that.
True secular.
Yeah.
So how about, Silver, do you have another question?
No, I have to.
Oh, wait.
I have to
I'm
go
being
use the
interrupted.
No, I have to use the little boy's room.
Oh.
It's going to disappear. I would hold it, but it's an hour off.
I love how in no way did he think that he could just say, I'll be right back. We have to,
Might as well.
Mike, we have to do. So now, Silver, you and I get to ask the real question.
Oh, okay. All right.
No, I'm kidding. So did you have a lot of those experiences while we wait for him though? Because when did Teen Witch when was it first published?
A long time ago. No, actually, the worst one I ever had, and I've told this story often because it is why I so revere Laurie Cabot. This is why I adore the woman. I mean, I've talked to her, but this is why. So my husband and I are in Boston, I think, or Salem. I don't even remember where we were. We were in Massachusetts, right? And so it was another Borders. And I was supposed to do a radio show before I went to the Borders in the afternoon. And I get on the radio show, and it was a really good interviewer. He had spoken to presidents and, really famous people. And he was a very kind and, a lovely person. However, the people that were running the phone lines were not quite as accommodating. And they let people on that seriously told me I was a terrible parent. They ate me alive. And my interviewer apologized. He was just like, and when we left the radio station, I could see the people through the window that had put all these phone calls through, and they were sitting there laughing. They were laughing at me. And I went back to the hotel room for my break before we went to Borders, and I was laying on the bed, and I said to my husband, I don't know if I can do this. Mm-hmm. If it's going to be like that at Borders, because these were local people that had called in, I said, I don't know if I can do it. And my husband's going, no, I'm right there. You're going to be fine. You can do this, it's going to be okay. So I get to the Borders, and it was one with more than one level. It was a pretty cool one. And I got up there, and I was just starting, and I turn around, and in walks this amazingly beautiful woman and 4 or 5 of obviously her coven mates. Mm-hmm. And she just like sailed in, and she sat down. She didn't interrupt what I was saying. She didn't make a big deal, no big fuss. No, I am Laurie Cabot, and so you will kiss my feet type thing, not at all. Sat down and listened to the lecture. And I was absolutely enamored because I felt so calm. And she told me later that one of her people had heard the interview, and they couldn't believe, how we were being trashed. And they just made up their mind that they were going to go there to make sure that absolutely nothing happened.
It's Laurie Cabot.
That it was a safe space. And to me, she will always be the most magnificent human being ever.
And she likes emojis now.
Literally, this text, he received some about his cat from Lori while you were praising her. It was like kismet.
She's like, she's a black cat. She will learn fast and keep away all harmful energies.
See, it was like you mentioned her name and you conjured her. Isn't that's so odd?
Oh, I so love her. She's just amazing.
when I look at people like Lori Cabot or what you faced, like, just like, I remember when I was younger, I wasn't even a witch. I was a Catholic. Thank God I was not some sort of evangelical or whatever, but, and I was one by choice. My parents were not Catholic, but, I remember though, the early stages when I was quite young of witchcraft becoming popular. And it was, it was becoming something that people talked about at school, and the way they treated those people in where I grew up in the South, like, oh my God, like they're just so violent and hateful.
It still is in some places.
It's just, and it's coming back around with this, like a large portion of these online ortho bros, like I was talking about in the beginning, they're all getting rigidly traditional.
We're sheltered because we live in New Orleans.
Yeah,
too.
New Orleans is very sheltered.
I live in New Orleans and Salem, Massachusetts. I'm sheltered now. Yeah.
But
for now.
But I think about all that, and I think, do you know what gets me through to kind of have an answer to Stephen's question about what do you do with the bullying or whatever? And this goes to what you were just talking about. So we're seeing the difference between Lori walking in and then these regular people is my bullies are boring. So why would I listen to what boring, miserable lives they live? You know what I mean? And I'm traveling the world, hanging out with witches and doing magic and like, happily married and loving all of this.
It seldom happens. It's kind of like
just boring people.
It's kind of like being harassed for being gay. It doesn't happen very often to me because I live in New Orleans and I live in liberal places right now. Yeah. I've had it happen before. So when it does, it's really shocking.
It's weird, right?
Like, it's really shocking when it happens. It happened, actually, we were walking down Salem. This is about a year ago or something. And Christian's walking down and somebody drove by and called him the F word of the car. And it just was a weird moment because you're like, wow, haven't heard something like that in a long time.
It's very like,
witchcraft is the same way, but there are people that we encounter who probably have it really hard. That's why I said I didn't have it that hard, really.
No, I feel lucky. I'm very blessed.
I think we really have to ask ourselves, why is this happening? Why?
The pendulum always swings the other way.
Oh, I know, exactly. But
it's a backlight.
We were given a moment to, I feel like the craft was given a moment to get its feet on the ground.
Right.
And there's almost a reminder of, we told you from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So that those who, I think there's, especially like new people, there's this kind of idea that you want to, and a lot of us had it, including me at one point in time, that you want to sort of like see the druids come back. You want to
the temples,
the original druids, not the Masonic Stonehenge ones, and you want, not making fun of them, but the glory of pre-Christian world, the world coming back and having its rightful place or whatever. I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is to knock off all the high horses, and I think religion and the gods are meant to be intimate.
I agree. So did you have one, Silver?
I don't know. I'm having such a good time listening to your questions.
I'm passing it to you.
Well, let me see. I guess if you had, since I do very much enjoy helping people who are new to the craft, if you had one piece of advice that you would give them, based on all your years of participation and study, what would you say?
Move.
To Salem or New Orleans?
somewhere in London, Salem, New Orleans, somewhere where you can, if you were really having the calling that I had, I probably wasn't ready. So, we always say that, I wish I would have done it sooner, but I wish I would have done it sooner. But everything happens in its own right time. And I earned a lot of stripes in my homegrown roots, that I wouldn't be the person that I am now, or the witch that I am now without them. But I think that too many people, like Levi was saying to me just not long ago, they hem and they haw and they hem and they haw, and just do it. Just do it.
My advice:
move, jump, leap, do the thing. Ask for initiation, get that hairdo, whatever it is that's calling you. Don't wait. Life's too short. And enjoy the process.
I told you this story one time, Silver, you might like this. My dad had this saying all the time. It's a story about a hunter who is drunk and he's hanging out with his buddies going hunting late at night, and they shouldn't be doing
Is this a
it.
metaphor for me?
No. And he goes, But let's have a conversation about why you thought it was. But he goes out with his friends and he's up in the tree because he's trying to go up to look out and see where they could see something. And there's a wild raccoon up there. And it starts biting and scratching him, and he's stuck there because he can't climb down, and there's a raccoon here. And so all of his friends are screaming and nobody's moving or doing anything. And so he finally screams down, "Shoot up amongst us, somebody needs the relief." Right? Even if like, it's like you can't stay in stasis forever.
No.
But my advice,
people do though.
Oh, they do. But I was saying I like your advice. But my own advice, Silver, this is going to sound bizarre perhaps, but my advice to seekers is let it be weird.
I mean, it will be.
Let it be weird. Religion does not have to be contorted into your preconceived notions. You're not going to know everything going in. That's good, not bad. Like, I think
wouldn't it be disappointing
if you did? Yes,
if you knew every single thing.
Where would the mystery be? Where would the magic? So my biggest advice is I think we're desperate sometimes to make people feel too safe and to make people feel too heard and to drag things out too long. Let it be weird. Like if you're going to call yourself a witch in 2025 or soon to be 2026.
Now we're not advocating
in a Christian nation
every kind of weirdness.
No, it's like you're going to experience weird othering moments. It's going to be unique and life-changing if you let it be, right? So like I just tell people all the time, let it be weird. Like, don't come in with these preconceived notions of like, I'm going to look like this person I saw on social media, or I'm going to look like this author I really love who wrote, it's like, let it be weird. I know that's an odd answer, but like,
I get it.
It's a good one.
I don't remember the question.
So what would your advice be to somebody right now, Silver?
The craft is not stagnant.
Ooh.
If it was stagnant, it would be dead. And it's going to live and it's going to grow in many different ways. And it depends on who's practicing it. There's no one right way for anything, ever.
Yeah, I think it's like, we say a lot, not we necessarily, but a lot of people who are part of tradition say tradition is not taking care of ashes, but protecting a flame.
Well, one of the things that I kind of coined for myself and a few others now is when it comes to tradition, like a tradition, because we're not just our tradition,
No, we're more than that.
Witchcraft is older than the Alexandrian tradition. I'm an Alexandrian priest, but I'm also a witch. And I think that variation is good. Deviation from the core concepts of a tradition is not bad, but you're no longer a part of that tradition if you deviate too much, and so that's a line you have to walk on your own. That's why we say in Alexandrian witchcraft, you're free to come and go as your conscience dictates, because if you ever get to a point to where you want to deviate and this isn't for you anymore, you should go.
Yeah,
you should move on and go and do your own thing. But I think variation is a necessity, even in a tradition, because every coven, every witch, even in a tradition, is going to be a little different.
And it's like evolution,
and
right?
continue to
no
create.
New genes, no new variety leads to death. Like that is what happens. So I agree.
Just like in a coven, every witch is different.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hyper individualistic journey for a lot of people. So Christian Clark has a question. I'll start with you, Silver. He's got a couple, so I'm going to paraphrase if you don't mind. Everybody on the show talked about the goddess being quintessential in their journey to witchcraft. So Silver, was there a manifestation of the goddess that you felt initially drawn to when you were coming into craft? And then has your relationship to the idea of the goddess changed throughout your journey?
My relationship has absolutely changed as I learned more and more. I had a goddess moment. My tradition is the Black Forest clan, and our main goddess, is the Morrigan. And many people in the beginning went, "Oh, you're kind of the Morrigan." However, she is very much many-faceted. However, I met the Morrigan face to face. And that is why she is the goddess of our tradition, and I will never forget it. There was and I was like every other seeker. I was afraid I was making this mistake or doing this wrong or inviting the demons of hell into my life. Like,
Fine.
hey, I was a Baptist. I mean, come on, Oh yeah.
Silver Raven, the Baptist, everyone.
So, but I had a close-up and personal experience with the Morrigan, and that is how Black Forest was born. And she has guided us. She's protected us. What's really kind of scary is because I'll be 70 real short, like a couple of months or so. When you're in a tradition or working with a group of people for so long, that the people who were following a specific line of practices go to their grave with those practices.
Yeah.
This is a totally different, this is a real head rip. When you realize that there are people who walked to the other side and they were Black Forest through and through. That was the tradition for them. That was who they were. And they were very much loved and very much, a part of our group mind. The other thing I really learned, and I know this wasn't really a question, but one of the biggest things that I learned in the craft was about the group mind and how powerful the group mind is and how it is used against you in everyday life and in your news, your politics, and people, they have no idea that this is what is going on. But the group mind that is the heart of a tradition, is the group mind and how it grows and heals and changes its membership. But the membership also grows and heals within the group mind. It's interesting. I know, way off.
The egregore, the huge sort of spiritual union that happens. Mm-hmm. You feel tapped into it for sure. So Brian, back to Christian's question. Was there a particular manifestation? You mentioned reading, for example, Buckland and being introduced to this idea.
Well, I had experiences, obviously. The original, that was just intellectual. Mm-hmm. So that was reading it in a book and being like, oh, there's a goddess. There were entire civilizations, there were entire religions, there were entire peoples who believed God was a woman. And that just really resonated with my soul and made my 15-year-old little brain explode. As far as nowadays, they like to say your patron deities. In my first coven that I worked with, my first teacher was, I like to say, because there's no other way to explain it, by today's standards would be called traditional witchcraft. Yeah. It was a homegrown ground roots coven of, inspired by Gardner and Alexandrian witchcraft. But she was very Celtic in her, I'm not dating myself. I keep doing that.
Keeps doing it.
It was a time when Celtic was everything. Witchcraft was Celtic. So, she was very into that. So during my my initiation, one of my initiations with her, a raven circled the ritual, and it was just me and her. But I took that as an omen, and so my patron goddess became the Morrigan, who I would often pronounce Morrigu.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't know what's right, but Morrigan I think is more common because that's how Christine says it too, and she actually has been to Ireland on numerous occasions. So I've been once and it was a blur. So, but I had other ones too, some more meaningful than others. And I think that's, for me anyway, that's myth, not to Joseph Campbell everything. I know you love that so much, but the power of myth and just what story is playing itself, what mythos is playing itself out with you at the time. But I wrote a lot of poetry. I think some of it I put in my first book, but I wrote a lot of poetry. I think I have a charge for her in my first book that I wrote, that I did publish that one. But I wrote a lot of poetry with her, and but later on there were other goddesses. Like, right, the last few years it's really been Isis has been kind of my big inspiration. But I believe in Big Mama. I believe in a monotheistic goddess, and I think these goddesses are all just her expressions through time, history, and poetry, and art, and all that sort of thing. So whatever you gravitate, it's going to change.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to change.
I think this is a unique thing I don't think I've ever shared on this show. I have a huge love for very particular named deities from history. Like Isis is massive for me. That's usually the statue on my altar.
I know who your big one is, though.
Yeah, and I have a lot of them. Hera is a huge one for me. I have a huge relationship to Hera. I don't know why. She really doesn't, is not associated with anything in my life, but I just love her. But, and this is something that I'm going to try to word carefully. When I was initiated, and for a long time afterwards, after my first degree initiation all those years ago, I sort of fell in love with the Queen of the Witches. This image of an almost fey, youthful, deviant woman, right? Who did not follow the rules, who despised, the churches that had, been so cruel for so long, that hated dog-collared priests.
I was there for these phases.
But I think it wasn't a cheap, but
I loved them.
It wasn't a cheap sort of rebellion. I didn't love her because she was punk rock or whatever.
Levi was basically like, the goddess is the most beautiful expression of divine philosophy, and her marble temples are within your soul. And then the next day, Black Phillip,
yes.
Phillip.
It was like both, right? But I think for a long time, that was the image that I loved. And I think that it's very important as an Alexandrian that I always remember that in a circle, and this is not some big secret, I'm always experiencing the goddess. Not always. I am at very core moments experiencing the goddess through a living woman, through an actual human being in front of me.
That's true.
And so that has shaped the way I view the goddess more than anything, because I see her as alive in the flesh, right? She's the animals, the trees, the flesh, sex, death, life. Like,
so remember when I asked Val that question, who's your favorite goddess? And she said, my mother.
Yeah, same here. My mother was my favorite goddess. My best friends are my favorite goddesses. It's I love that part of our tradition is, and again, it's something Maxine and Alex have talked about publicly. It's not a big secret. We do that. Like, we have a living priestess serve as the goddess. I love that. I love getting to know her in the flesh, where it's like wine and cheese and food and dancing and sweat and incense, and it's real. She's amongst her children.
Sometimes there could be more wine.
But she's amongst her children. So that's how my relationship has changed. Is, of course, she's the celestial Isis, but she's also a woman who drinks wine and cracks jokes and is beautiful and funny and wicked. I love that.
I mean, that's just one of the ethoses of witchcraft, really, is that I love about the movement, regardless of what tradition people find themselves. We all tend to agree that the spiritual and the physical are not completely separated.
Yeah.
That we have a responsibility to nature now. We have a responsibility to people now.
And we worship gods that don't want servants.
Yes, I agree with that.
Why would they need them? What does the Morrigan need with a slave? What would she do with it? You know what I mean? It's just
sometimes it's just fun to put their heads on poles.
But I love that we, most witchcraft traditions are rooted in that idea of why would they want you to be a servant?
I always thought of the Morrigan as being not to side rail as even though she's known as the goddess of war, I always thought of her as more of a goddess of fate. So
she prophesies the fall of Cuchulainn.
Very layered in her,
the Raven Queen
aspects.
I'm going to actually ask you this, Silver, because you and Brian both brought up the Morrigan, and we could also talk about how contemporary witchcraft has a deep love for Hecate, for Pan. Why do you think it is that we're so drawn to these liminal deities that touch darkness, death, fear? Why as a witch do you think we are drawn to those deities instead of things that are much more sweet-natured, perhaps, or sort of portrayed that way, at least in myth? Why do we like the dark so much?
Because it's life.
Ooh, that's a good answer.
It's what we experience in our lives. We experience the balance of both. We walk into birth, we walk into death. if you ignore the darkness, then you're far more likely to be harmed. In all actuality, yes. I hate to say what comes to mind is Pollyanna. That's an oldie but good.
Yeah.
But by embracing it, by working on our own shadow selves, by admitting our responsibilities, the fact that we're not perfect, we're not gods, we hate. Why do we hate? We get angry. Why do we get angry? Let's work on it. How can we? To me, the craft is helping us to elevate ourselves.
Great work.
To know who we are. I am this. Now, do I like this? Well, no, maybe not. Maybe I want to use some of the tools that we have to rise above. To me, we're here to create.
I like that word. Brian, why do you think that there is a tinge of that in craft, of varying traditions?
I think this has changed and will change again. But if we're going to look at the original, witchcraft mythos before the witchcraft revival, I mean, it was Diana of the Nocturnal Flights. It was the devil. It was the man in black. It was
Her and the Hunter.
Herodias. It was, all these different things that were nocturnal and a little bit off on the edge. Look at Greek gods. They, like we're saying, they're expressions of all the human qualities,
lust and love.
And if you really study Greek mythology, you'll find no one scarier than Aphrodite.
Well,
because
100%
her curses are the worst.
The worst.
I think sometimes it's because people are trying to understand facets of themselves or things that they're afraid of. Mm-hmm. Religion traditionally has been a tool for people to face death or to cope with death. So I'm sure people approach witchcraft in some of those same things. I think for those of us who are like maybe on a more religious spectrum of witchcraft, it's more about respecting the process of life, death, and rebirth, and realizing death is just natural. We might be afraid of it because it's unknown, but if you are on the path of initiation, you should be well equipped to. That's how the ball bounces. That's life. You're always going to have a surprise. You're always going to have a challenge because we're here to grow and to learn and create, and perhaps to see if what we create is worth being created. Those are all philosophical ideas. But I think in modern culture, I think we're going into dark times, and we're also, people have done that with Christianity. Christianity really didn't present. Jesus is all loving and all this sort of thing. But really, the Christianity most people are presented with is the God of the Bible that's vengeful and wrathful and
judgment,
the end times and all this sort of really, it's very dark,
apocalyptic.
Really, if you take the Christian God into context, he gives Zeus a run for his money. At least Zeus could have some fun, once in a while he turned into a donkey and had sex with someone, this God's angry all the time, and so, and he doesn't have a wife or any fun. So Jesus is a parallel to that, where he's all loving and forgiving and all that. But that's not what they talk about, really, is it? And I don't know why I'm going on this tangent.
No, I think you're hitting something important, which is sometimes it's
cultural.
What you're saying, I think, is very related to what Silver is saying, which is it's also about honesty, just in general. So, like, I think if you look at, I don't trust a God that looks like
can't turn into a donkey and have an affair.
Sure. But that looks like a salesperson, right? That's so clean cut, so perfected, so removed from the world. It doesn't feel complete. It feels like a half story. And it also is, people lie. I think there are a lot of Christians, for example, and we're picking on them because they're the majority of our country.
The greatest devil worshippers in the world are Christians.
Of course they are. They give him all his power, right? But I think that there's a lot of them that portray a very meek and mild and all light, all love sort of face of God. But that's not really the God they're worshiping. And it's not how they treat their children. It's not how they treat outsiders.
They're just mad. They're not.
It's fake, right? And so I think, it was what you were talking about, Silver.
I was going to say something politically incorrect and I stopped myself.
But I think It's 100% what you both are saying, though, is it's not honest. There's a sort of ugly untruth about
it's not human.
Yeah, it's too,
or it's extremely, it's extreme. It's an extreme facet. There's no,
there's no sort of like,
as a child, it didn't make sense to me.
No.
I was like, doesn't God have a wife? Is Mary his wife? You know, it didn't make sense to me because it doesn't make sense, quite frankly.
So we have a good question.
He's got a son and no wife. How did this happen?
I know. I felt the same way too. It always felt so one-sided.
This is weird.
So we have a question for just for funsies. I'll start with you, Silver. It was, what do you do if you've been somebody who's very scientifically minded or academically minded and you have lost the mystery in magic? Like if you've analyzed
I'm
it
not
to
sure
death.
if I understand.
Can you repeat that again?
It's if you are somebody who's studied a lot, your mind works very scientifically, your mind works very academically, and you're having a hard time with the mystery at the heart of magic.
I mean, if you were
do?
extremely intelligent, but you couldn't pull the broomstick out of your...
Brian.
Oh my goodness.
Short. I can shorten it, Silver. How do you keep the mystery alive, even if your brain fights it sometimes?
I think honoring the simplicity. So I know this is going to sound really strange, but I used to have pet rats. I loved rats, okay? But they had the most unique little hands. And I used to look at their tiny little hands and I used to think, what marvel created this functional little hand? There has to be something. There's a mystery beyond me. I could never make, that's. And so looking at simple things, looking at, even if you look at something under a microscope, what marvel is there? It's a mystery all in itself. The dew on a leaf in the fall on the ground is a marvel all in itself, looking at the reflection of it. So I guess what I'm saying is distance yourself from the analytical mind and embrace it with the heart. And you'll see the marvel, the mystery.
So, Brian, what do you do when your mind gets in the way sometimes, or your brain gets in the way if you're overthinking?
I drink.
Okay. Let's be perfectly honest. That is a fair answer.
It's a statistical truth to the fact that most intelligent people do drugs or drink because they have to dumb themselves down to a system.
Oh my God. I don't want to interrupt you, but I have a dear friend who anytime she said something to me I love, and she said, anytime I'm starting to feel depressed and I'm overthinking, I go, oh, I got to get a little dumb. She's like, oh, I got to get a little dumb again.
Exactly.
I'm thinking too much.
There's this meme, I think, that's something about, you're on a rock, flying through space next to a giant fireball, and you don't believe in magic. Science teaches us how much we don't know. Science teaches us that life is a miracle, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense on so many levels. Even the search for other life, how could we possibly, as of today, we don't have any proof of any intelligent life outside of our own that's been made public. And that in itself is an extremely strange marvel, considering how vast. We literally can look at a planet and say, that planet's made out of diamonds. That's happened. We have found a planet made out of diamonds, and somehow they can tell it's a giant diamond planet. But we can't find life. That's, or at least that's what we're being told. No. So yeah, it's all marvelous, really, isn't it? There's so much we don't understand. And I think the thing that I really think is important as a group mind, as a species, there are certain things we have collectively always believed. We know there's life after death. There hasn't been a culture that has existed on Earth where it said, you die and that's it. And you could take that down to psychological, of course, but there's all these theories and these experiences that there is spiritual, there is other side, there are some kind of creators, gods, ancestors, something else is going on the other side, and we're having a conversation with it. And magic is a perfect example of that. We've always believed in magic. Some religions have tried to control it and give the magic only to certain priests or gods or prophets, but every religion has magic. Every religion. It just might be isolated to a few individuals,
or hidden.
Call it miracles, So it's there. These are things we carry as our heritage. So I think if you're being overly intellectual about something, I think that's actually the magic killer. I think it's important to be able to be analytical, to be able to question, to be a doubting Thomas. I think those things are all very important. But I think there has to be a point where you can suspend rational thought and just do it, like we were saying earlier. There's these moments of magic where you just do it, and I think it's in craft. We often have a saying where we say there's a Pollyannic ways of thinking and there's Dionysian ways of thinking, right hand, left hand, right brain, left brain. I know this is all pseudo. Levi loves pseudoscience. But, this kind of philosophy of different ways of thinking, regardless of how you want to try to make it scientific or mythic, like I do, I think it's important to have both in craft, that you have to have your intellectual, you have to have your, philosophers, but you also have to have that person that can go stand naked at an altar, invoke, and the god shows up, which has nothing to do with how much they know about the stars.
Correct.
But it's a journey. So if you cannot suspend your imagination, you cannot suspend your intellectual thought, you will never be able to really work magic.
I think I would add, it is...
Did any of that make any sense?
It did. Did. I am a very heady person by nature. And I think...
But you've changed too.
But religiously, I'm not.
Because you are two coins. You're Pollyannic
and Dionysian.
You're Pollyannic is like, I'm the smartest person in this room. This is Levi.
Believe that.
I am the smartest person.
I don't believe that.
And then the other side, he does. And on the other side of the coin, he's insane.
This is true.
Yeah.
That part I will totally cop to. I think that, a lot of Americans, I feel, because you said you grew up Baptist, right, Silver? I think a lot of Americans are very influenced by Protestant ways of thinking about religion, even if they're not Protestant, even if their parents were something else.
Yeah.
So they think that religion is something you think about and believe, which is a very Protestant belief, right? Like, it's like getting saved at a Baptist church.
There's a lot of intellectual.
It's intellectual, right? I believe that Jesus did X,
because it was
Z.
born out of questioning the Pope.
Correct. It's born out of, it's a religion of the book. It's very much into, sort of like the doctrine and whatever of the book. But religion, as understood by most scholars of religion, is something you do. So when people get over intellectual, I'm like, well, are you doing the thing? Are you doing magic? Are you keeping your rituals alive? Are you engaged in the practice? It's a thing you do, right? It can't just exist in your head. Like it exists in your praxis, and it's a very lived thing. So I think that's what it is, right? It's like people get so stuck in this very Protestant, basically like, am I saved mentality, but whatever the equivalent of that for witches is. And it's like, well, that's not really how this works, right? It's not about unknitting everything. It's like you're doing witchcraft.
I think Christians get saved. With witches, we say, did they survive?
Did they survive? Some of them didn't make it.
Some of them don't make it.
Some of them don't make it.
They run off and become lesbians.
They come around and become lesbians.
Or Buddhists.
Or Buddhists. That's a big one too.
No offense, Patrick.
My husband is a Buddhist.
He heard me say, Patrick's a Buddhist like Adina from AbFab. He thought it was hilarious.
He did.
I was like, oh, you heard me.
So if anybody doesn't, I thought we could bring it back.
We've got 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure first, let's ask Silver. Silver, what are your projects and things that you're doing right now? And what and where and how can people find you?
Yes.
Right now, I am doing the Great Release program. I do it just about every year for quite some time. And the idea is 31 days, every day you release something. That's the program. Although I do create different formats every year to make it fun, to make it interesting. This year it's very whimsical because I'm using little characters that I developed. And I also I make it fun for myself as well because I do it right along with everybody. And so, Levi, you will love the fact that we do astrology every day. There's and you can do as much or as little as you like. But by the end of the program, the idea is you have released all these different things so down to make room as the new year comes in for things that you really want to do, and to feel like you're not quite so weighed down. So that's my every day. I write it every day. I do the artwork, so I make it fun too. And
where do people find this?
They can find it all over the place. It's on my Facebook page. It's on my Instagram page. It's on and links to it or tells you where to go. My WordPress blog. It's on there. It's also on my website, whispermagick.com. There's a blog on there, and you can follow along and enjoy it, I hope. It's a free program, no charge. It's just something to help you out at the end of the year when things are so stressful. So that's my big project right now.
Nice. I know you're going to be at WitchCon. I think HexFest too. Yeah, so WitchCon coming up, which is in March, I think, right?
February.
Right?
When is my festival?
7th to 9th,
it's after Mardi Gras, right?
I believe so, yes. But it's in February.
February, and then because it was March last year, and then HexFest is in August. Are we going to see another book from you, Silver?
I don't know. And that's an honest answer.
I have the same answer.
Well, I keep growing and changing, and I'm not sure what I would like to present. There's a lot of authors out there. They're very good. They have really good ideas. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking more at something to tell you what it's like to live it.
Live it every day.
Yep. This is what it was like to live it. So that's where my head's at.
So we're at the end here, and I thought it would be interesting. Last time, I keep trying to think of these ways to have good final questions. Like I made it be the last time.
We got time for one more
What's your
question.
secret truth? So now I'm going to ask this. If you had to think, and you can take some time because we do have 9 minutes. What is one word you would use looking back on witchcraft's history that stands out to you, and one word for its future?
You're looking at me like it's my
Either
turn.
one of you.
That's hard. I'm going to say goddess.
Oh, I like that answer, though.
Goddess.
That's a good answer.
That's good, though.
Because I don't think that's going to change.
Good job. What about you, Silver? One word for the past, one word for the future.
Mine is birth and growth.
Keeping attached to living.
And it comes from, well, in darkness we were born. It's kind of where I'm going with this, and we have so many marvelous tools that we can only bring light if we use them correctly. So, yeah.
Levi.
Yep. What about you?
For the past, the earth. For the future, the stars.
Ooh.
We might not have a choice.
That's what I mean.
That was good.
The earth, the future, the fire. Right.
There's only one way we're getting out of here, and it's with Elon Musk.
No, God, hell. I'd rather just die.
He's
here.
the only one trying to go to Mars. Yeah, he's not going to Mars. So we actually have one more time for a question from the chat.
Okay.
None of you call in. I think you're all cowards.
He
and
does.
I'm disappointed in all of you.
We're getting a lot of comments about our word choices. I did like that you chose goddess and goddess, though, and I think Silver's
It's the only thing that came to my brain.
birth and growth. I mean,
That's called
witchcraft
programming.
I've noticed something the whole evening. You always tie witchcraft back to the organic, like the living.
What are you saying?
When I was saying Silver's answers, she's always tying it back to this concept of it's a living.
Well, I mean, I could tell you right now, not that I need to, but I haven't read every one of Silver's books, but I did read the big three, the big three, broomstick, cauldron, and for some reason the other one's escaping me right now. Cauldron. No, there's three. There's to ride a silver broomstick, to stir a magic cauldron, and what was the other one, Silver?
To light a sacred flame.
Thank you. I read those three, and it was actually funny because as I was talking about with my parents, I had introduced them to Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft. So when this is actually a really interesting story. So my aunt, when she found out, she was actually kind of worried about it. And so she was married to a man at the time who was an Irish man whose last name was Dunn, which means brown bread. But I can't remember his first name now. But anyway, she was, my nephew's getting into witchcraft. I'm really worried about it. She wasn't a particularly religious person. She got over it. But he was like, you leave him alone. There's nothing wrong with what he was doing. And that turned into a whole different story. But when she came to the house, that was the book that I gave her to read, was To Ride a Silver Broomstick.
Oh,
because and she loved the picture on the cover. She goes, see, this is what I think a witch would look like. So, like, she'd have a tan. I don't know why my aunt thought that, but she thought a witch has to have a tan. And I was like, well, we have these experiences, but her book was presenting the religion of witchcraft.
Yes.
It wasn't like, I hate to be mean. There's two reasons I'm mean about Scott Cunningham. One, I really didn't like his work, but also I saw him on programs and he just seemed like a mean person.
I love how we got personal, Silver. Jesus.
Yes. I mean, I never met him personally, but he just seemed like a mean person. I can go on YouTube. They're on there now. You can find interviews. He seems like a mean person. But so other people may have met him. Maybe he was lovely. But Raymond Buckland, I never met him, and he seemed like a real gentleman.
Oh, he was marvelous.
Yeah.
Oh, he was wonderful.
Yes, and you could just tell, he was a class act. So, but these people were all talking about the witchcraft movement as a religion, regardless of whether they use the word witchcraft or Wicca, and I prefer witchcraft to Wicca personally, because sometimes I like historical accuracy.
Sometimes.
But once in a while. But, I definitely think her book contributed to the movement and was one of the last for a long time. Because we had this dead space, and maybe that was just because I stopped reading witchcraft books.
Oh, and publishing?
It seemed like, it just
was a pushback.
Dead space for the religion of witchcraft to be even mentioned. Yeah.
But we have
it was just gratitude. Fat pagans.
No, he's
and
so hateful.
Spells. Anyway, so I've got to get it out somehow. So
if he doesn't get it out, Silver.
Do we have a question?
It comes. No, I'm going to get this out. If the meanness doesn't come out on this show, Silver, then it comes out at 3 a.m. on Facebook Messenger. One time he sent me a video of himself quoting a scene from.
That was for fun.
From Game of Thrones. Word for word. It was so much rage. You did a good job.
No, I literally did the entire scene myself.
You did great.
And I sent it accidentally to the whole internet group.
You did.
Accidentally.
But I want to say,
I still don't know who saw that. But
I consider it just such a blessing that we got to know you through Hexfest. Myself, wonderful. Brian, and Patrick. Patrick loves you.
And your son. I can't remember his name.
Nicholas.
Nicholas is very nice. So next week, for episode 3, our special guest is going to be Sharon Day, who is an Alexandrian high priestess who runs the Coven of the Stag King in London. She is going to be there for the subject of privacy in craft, public versus private work.
Nice.
So that's our show next week. I'm going to thank Silver Ravenwolf for appearing. You, she actually doesn't go on a lot of shows because she's wise. And she doesn't go to a lot of pagan events because she's even wiser. But we've been very blessed to have her in our circle in public and our circle in these discussions. And we thank you for your contributions to the craft. And we appreciate you and we love you.
Oh, we love you. Mwah, 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 mwah.
Thank you so much for joining us. And for everybody who's watching, thank you for joining us. We will see you next time, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.